Well, we certainly do not have the honky-tonk blues this weekend on a Rolling Stones weekend here on the Basketball Show. Again, just such good stuff. Sports 1440 Pulsar, Ryan Reed. And we're going to jump now into an interview that I had yesterday afternoon with Pat Boylan. Pat found time in an extremely busy time in Indianapolis. I looked at this as kind of an Appalus weekend, Indianapolis and Minneapolis, and the success they're having in basketball in those two mid-sized cities. But Indianapolis, my gosh, with all the excitement, of course, about Caitlin Clark and the attention that it's brought on them, their role in NCAA March Madness is incredible. But now you've got the Pacers heading to the Eastern Conference Finals again. So, Pat, the play-by-play voice, for a young guy, a longtime play-by-play voice of the Pacers and the Fever, joined me yesterday, and we're going to pick up where I asked him about the success of the Pacers against the Cavaliers.
Yeah, I know we don't know who the Eastern Conference final opponent is yet, Knicks or Celtics, but maybe I should give that same analysis to you because it worked pretty well for the Cavaliers series. It was just kind of a crazy series because I kept finding myself thinking, wow, I can't believe this is happening so many times. And please don't misunderstand. Like, I've been around this team for over a decade, and this iteration of this team, it is special. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton has done some incredible things in his young career. Rick Carlisle's a Hall of Fame level head coach. There's no question that there are the players and people in this organization to pull something like this off. So beating the Cavaliers, to me, not shocking, although no question going into it, you're the underdog. I mean, they won 64 games. They blew out Miami in the first round. I think the most lopsided series ever in the first round. And so the Pacers had a great year to that point, but what Cleveland had accomplished was really, really impressive. They became just, and this is unfortunate, a negative nugget about the Cavaliers, but going into this playoffs, there had been 27 teams in NBA history that had won at least 64 games. And of those 27, 24 of them reached at least the conference finals. And in most cases, they reached the finals and in many cases won the championship. So not getting to the Final Four when you win 64 games, very, very rare. And so that's just kind of what the Pacers were going up against. I am not surprised the Pacers won the series. I thought if things broke the right way and if they played a great series, that they definitely had a chance to do so. You know, I think you kind of circle when you're the underdog Game 6. If everything goes right in the series, you might have a chance to close it out at home in Game 6. And that's kind of what I had done at the beginning. And, you know, it's really just amazing, and I think speaks to the maturity of this group. You won game one on the road, but this team has done stuff like that all of the time, gone somewhere and surprised some team. To me, that was not surprising at all. What was so impressive was when you do that as the underdog and you win game one on the road. Now, I know New York literally just did it too, so it's kind of in the forefront of everybody's mind, but game two, the home team almost always gets because their backs are against the wall. They're at home. They're the team with the better record. I mean, almost always that game goes to the home team, and then you split the series 1-1, and you feel good as the road team, haven't gotten that split. For the Pacers to trail that whole game two and then to pull it out, and then when you're up 3-1 and backs against the wall for Cleveland and back at home, I mean, games 2 and 5 are not the type of games that the road team typically wins in the scenarios that the Pacers were in. And for them to get both of those, I thought just really speaks so highly to the maturity of what's a pretty young team, although Pascal Siakam coming into the mix certainly gave them a ton of needed experience. But, you know, look, I back when we talked, I totally believed the Pacers had a chance to pull off the upset, but I would be lying to you if I thought that they had a realistic chance of pulling it off in 5 games without some catastrophic injury type event happening for the Cavaliers. And Garland wasn't 100%, and maybe Mitchell wasn't at the end. But the Pacers just kind of flat out dominated this series. And if they needed to play perfect, well, they didn't play perfect in game 3, that's for sure. But I would say the rest of that series is about as well and as close to perfect as you can play from the Pacers' perspective.
I'm talking to Pat Boylan. He is the voice of both the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever here on the Basketball Show. You know, Pat, I agree with you. Upset, yes, you have to qualify it as an upset because of Cleveland's regular season record. But I've seen a lot of negative press, not just on the Cavaliers, but on the Eastern Conference as well, about, and by negative, that maybe is a bit of an overstatement, but it's more of a lament of what is it with this Eastern Conference that you have a team like this that has a record, a record like they had, and they come into this series, and it seems like when the going got tough, they withered. Whereas the Pacers, as the going got tough, they got better. Now, I don't know necessarily that you can make this an East-West thing, but what are your thoughts on that? Because, for a long time now, even though the Celtics are the defending NBA championships, the East has always been regarded as somewhat inferior to the West. What are your thoughts on that kind of commentary on the Cavaliers' performance, but also on the strength of the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, I think it's a little overblown, but it would be wrong to dismiss it as a total non-factor. I mean, if you're watching this Oklahoma City-Denver series, you're going, goodness gracious. Yeah. I mean, look how good Oklahoma City is, and yet they're pushed right to the brink here with the Denver Nuggets, and we'll see. The West, top to bottom, I think is unquestionably stronger. You didn't have any playoff opponents in the West that were kind of like Miami in the East, where they were a team. By no means did I think Memphis was going to upset Oklahoma City, but Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Bane, they've got the type of players that you would not be surprised to see a team like that in the second round. A team like Miami would have been truly surprising to see them in the second round. And a team like the version of Orlando this year, I think would have been surprising to see them in the second round. But where I would push back on a lot of that is Boston is the defending champion and won 60 games, and the only team that won more games than the Cavaliers was Oklahoma City. And so at the very top, I think the East stacks up just fine with the West. And so I think that's kind of what's made this playoff so amazing. And I saw an amazing stat where as long as New York, I believe, wins their series, then if you add up all of the seeds of the final four teams, each of the last 3 years, that number will be the three highest years in the history of the NBA. And what I'm getting at is upsets are happening, right? Because that means you're not having 1 versus 2 and 1 versus 3 on each side, or 1 versus 3 and 2 versus 4 or something like that. You're getting true upsets getting to the conference finals. And I actually think that's really good for the NBA. If there's one thing about the NBA playoffs that, it tends to get dogged for, is just over the course of 7 games, it can be hard to have upsets. The parity level in the sport just in general is different from hockey in that regard. Whereas in hockey, your powers are your powers, but you see all the time upsets happen. In the NBA playoffs, they're less likely. So I think it's been really good just to have these last few years of Cinderella type runs like you see in the March Madness tournament happening in the NBA. And easy for me to say, my organization has been one of those each of the last 2 years. But I think Boston and Cleveland are at the top of, I think they would hang in more than fine in the Western Conference at the top. You maybe don't have the same level 1 through 10 in the East. But look, as somebody that grew up in Indy in the 90s, you don't often hear me do what I'm about to do, which is give the New York Knicks a lot of credit because they were the despised team growing up, and it's been kind of fun to bring this rivalry back. But look, there's no doubt the Pacers and the Knicks are 2 teams that if you are the better seeded team, you don't want to play in the playoffs. Both of these teams are tough. They're gritty. When you get into the clutch moments on the Knicks side, how good Jalen Brunson has been, and an unbelievable stat that was provided to me by our TV play-by-play voice, Chris Denari. If you look at the NBA's definition of a close game, which is a game within 5 points in the final 5 minutes, the Pacers have won 14 of their last 15 of those games dating back to the regular season. So the Pacers and the Knicks, we'll see if the Knicks get it done. But they're 2 teams that, punch above their weight class a little bit, which is kind of silly to say about a team from New York, but they sort of have an underdog type of feel about them, are really good in the clutch, really tough, really gritty, and not the type of team a favorite wants to see. And I think the Pacers deserve so much credit for knocking off a 64-win team. And I think if the Knicks take out the defending champion, I'll feel the exact same way about them. And we'll get Pacers and Knicks, for an Eastern Conference Finals, if that's the case, when those two teams matched up for the epic series in round 2 last year. And of course, in the 90s, it felt like those two teams met every year at some point in the playoffs. So it's possible we get another edition of this rivalry renewed.
Man, when you think of that, that's a matchup that I don't give enough thought to. But the 90s Knicks against the 90s Pacers, my gosh, the beef, the shooting, the trash talking, the physical play. What an amazing matchup that was in that particular era. That was such a cool, for lack of a better description, that was such a cool era. And to have those iconic teams and players literally throwing punches in the corner at each other, that was amazing to watch, wasn't it?
It's what I grew up on. I was born in 1990, so 90s Knicks, Pacers and Knicks. I mean, it's how I fell in love with the league. It's how I fell in love with basketball. It was, Reggie Miller, which it's so funny. It's just like what's old is new again here as we potentially bring this rivalry back for a second straight playoff matchup. But Tyrese Halliburton and Reggie Miller play very different styles of games. Tyrese Halliburton is a much, much better passer. Reggie Miller was, as good of a three-point shooter, non-Steph Curry division as there's ever been. But there are so many things that remind me of the two of them. Their propensity in the clutch moment. Halliburton hitting that shot in game 2 over Cleveland to win that game. How many big moments Reggie Miller had in the playoffs. Tyrese Halliburton's already had a bunch of them. Even something as simple where if you look at Tyrese Halliburton and he's kind of far away from you on the other side of the floor, and you put Reggie Miller in his prime or early in his career, I should say, over there. I mean, they're both kind of twigs that are about 6'5", 6'6". They kind of look the same.
They do.
The frames are the same. Yep. And it's just funny that what's old is new again thing. The style of basketball has changed. The NBA has determined that style of basketball, while, to those who grew up in it or to those who love that era of basketball, is iconic. But it's decided that it wants a more free-flowing game where you can show off the skill sets of the players. And for the most part, I agree with that. But it's just amazing kind of how this is seemingly coming back into the realm, the rivalry realm here of Pacers and Knicks. And you've got a guy like Halliburton who has a lot of Reggie Miller tendencies. And, the Knicks were those 90s Knicks teams. Yes, they had Patrick Ewing, but they were so tough and gritty too. You don't think of sometimes the big market teams being the tough and gritty ones. You think of maybe Indiana types being that when they have success, but that's what this Knicks team is too. And I'll tell you, I mean, again, as somebody that grew up literally, that was like public enemy number one for me as a kid. But I have a lot of admiration for what the Knicks have done the past couple of years. They don't have a top 5 or 6 player in the league type superstar, but they're built as a true team. They're tough-minded. They're gritty, and a lot of those qualities are true about the Pacers as well. And if we get another series between these two teams, I'd be shocked if it didn't go long. 6 or 7 games. Now, I frankly have been a little shocked that the first 2 rounds of the Pacers series didn't go long either. So I'm getting out of the prognostication business, but if we get Pacers and Knicks here again, it's just going to feel so fitting, I think, with the way these two teams play and the type of players that are on each roster and kind of hearkening back to that 1990s style of basketball.
Pat Boylan joining Paul Sir here on the Basketball Show, talking about the Pacers and the upcoming Eastern Conference Finals. A couple of thoughts that I just had. One is on the 90s Knicks. Can you imagine a front line of Ewing, Oakley, and Mason? I mean, that's like 1,000 pounds.
And they had Larry Johnson in the mix too.
Larry Johnson, I mean, beefy, strong, physical, like an offensive line more than a basketball front court. So, but I want to touch on the Pacers Knicks a little bit. I'm assuming the Pacers or the Knicks are going to win. You say that though, and
Boston did look awfully good in a desperation game after losing Tatum in that tragic Achilles injury, but I still believe the Knicks are going to find a way. Presupposing for just a moment that it is the Pacers and the Knicks. I do like the more physical play that's been added back into the NBA in the playoffs this year. It is more physical than I remember it being over the last few years. I think it's been overall good for the viewer to watch a much more physical brand of basketball in amongst all of the shooting, all of the fast pace. I'm really looking forward to seeing if this does come to fruition, that it is the Knicks and the Pacers, the up-tempo, push-it, deep Pacers going against the rather limited roster of the Knicks that try to control the pace with a player like Brunson who doesn't jump over you and dunk, doesn't necessarily blast past you with lightning speed and quickness. But, man, I don't know how you would even measure the size of the guy's heart. And the will and determination and how the whole team feeds off it. I just think it's a real compelling matchup of those two very unique teams.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, like I was saying before, it's not in my DNA to compliment the Knicks, but I really do have to, because the way they're built, the way they play, I thought the Bridges addition was huge. It would be a rematch of last year. But at the same time, Bridges was not a part of that team. Karl Anthony Towns was not a part of that team. They had DiVincenzo. The Knicks did a lot of changing in the offseason, but it all kind of centers around Jalen Brunson. And he's a fascinating guy for the reasons you've been describing, to have it all be centered around, because he was not a high draft pick for all those reasons you were just listing. He doesn't have lightning quick speed. He's small. He's tough, but he's not a big-time athlete. How many times does the guy dunk? Who knows? I would love to know that number, because it's probably incredibly low. And yet he's a primetime performer. He's a perennial all-star for good reason. I mean, and when the playoffs come around, he always seems to be at his best. He's just so tricky. I mean, there's nobody in the league that uses their center of gravity better than he does, and the shiftiness better than he does, and angles and all of that. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would be the other guy that kind of jumps out, but He's got some more just some natural tools that even Brunson doesn't have. But I mean, he's a master at all of it, and a very, very tough player to defend from a Pacers perspective. And then, Indiana's point guard, Halliburton, who has a lot of natural abilities that maybe Brunson doesn't have, but he's also shown the ability over the last couple of years to be, I would say, equally as clutch. I think you're talking now about two of the most clutch players in the league. So you have this kind of excitement where if this matchup happens, the Knicks are just not the type of team that run away from you. They probably don't have that level of firepower where they're going to win a bunch of games by 20 points. Look at their playoffs in of itself. I think that off the top of my head, I think the game where Tatum got hurt might have been the biggest margin of victory that they've had in the playoffs so far. All those Pistons games were close, but when they're in close games, that's where they're comfortable. And if you just look at even Tyrese Halliburton alone in the moments that he's had, he hit the big shot in game number 2 to win it. Just a few days before that, he beat Giannis to the rim to close out the Bucks, and that incredible comeback in the playoffs last year. Halliburton had that crossover on Patrick Beverley to beat the Bucks in game number 3. And then game 7 in the Garden was far from just Tyrese Halliburton, but the Pacers put up one of the all-time offensive performances in one of the biggest games in one of the toughest buildings to play in. So,
Pat Boylan, and you can listen to the entire interview, and it's filled with a lot of interesting discussion, particularly when we get towards the end of the interview talking about the upcoming game this afternoon between the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky and the opener in Indianapolis. So I would encourage you to check that out on our podcast after the show's over. So we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, Ryan and I will go into closing time here on the Basketball Show on your sports leader, Sports 1440. closing time on the basketball show. Paul and Ryan. Ryan, let's look at the poll and see what people are thinking.
We're asking what the most shocking exit was in the playoffs this year. The options were the Lakers, the Warriors, the Cavs, and the Celtics. The winner of the poll was the Celtics at 52.7% of the vote. I do think that's fair from the beginning of the playoffs, but I think after the Tatum injury, them losing wasn't surprising. But I guess this is just an overarching look at the playoffs. Second place is a tie between the Lakers and Cavs at 21.8% of the vote. And then the Warriors at 3.5% of the vote. And I do think it's maybe, I don't want to say hypocritical, but just a little contradictory where the Warriors are not surprising, because Curry's injured, but the Celtics are surprising and Tatum was injured.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
But Tatum wasn't injured when the Celtics lost 20-point leads.
That is true.
Late in the
You're
third
right.
quarter and fourth.
But do I think it's different if Tatum's healthy?
I don't
maybe
know.
they can still win game
Yeah, that's
5.
true. Yeah, maybe. You're right. It was interesting because just when you think you've got things figured out, so many things can happen. A key injury, a catastrophic injury in the case of Tatum, a key injury like the Cavs had to face to players, a couple of their bigs that were banged up that just weren't able to contribute at the level. Like all of those things factor in, certainly. But boy, the New York Knicks last night, that thrashing of an obviously dispirited and exhausted Boston Celtic team that just both physically and mentally were just not up to competing with the Knicks. And that's one of those nights where the door just opens and you have this unbelievable dominant performance, because Pat pointed out all of their games are tight against Detroit, against Boston up to that point. And then last night they make that definitive statement, which I think is a great lead-in to the upcoming series where they're going to be facing a very high-powered, high-octane, well-rested Indiana Pacer team. So I think the Eastern Conference is shaping up to be a really good 7-game series, and I would expect it. I would expect both teams to win some games, and I really like the fact we've got the Knicks and we've got the Pacers. We've got a small market team against the Knicks, who have been long suffering and waiting for a long time to have a chance to get back here. And my gosh, New York is just lit up.
For some reason, when I think Pacers-Knicks, I'm not even sure if they played each other, but I think of the 90s where it's like Reggie Miller and Patrick Ewing.
Patrick Ewing,
That's for some reason when I think of both those teams together, I just flash back to well before I was born. But the memories of watching those guys growing up, highlights.
Absolutely. And those were great series, physical series. And now you get to see Spike Lee on the sideline with a walker still cheering them on. I'm joking. But anyway, Spike's still there. Reggie Miller will be in the broadcast team. And there's some old voices. And it's cool to watch with the New York Knicks, too. They had a lot of their old players up to and including Dollar Bill Bradley. The U.S. Senator, Rhodes Scholar, who was instrumental in the 2 New York Knicks championships back in the 70s there. And they had so many of their alumni sitting in the stands. And the New York City, outside of Madison Square Garden, looked like the fan park here in Edmonton. The people are just lit up. Their favored, loved Knicks are back.
If you were to guess the all-time record between the Pacers and Knicks, who would you guess has won more playoff games against each other?
I would guess the Knicks, but
the Knicks are the Pacers have won 26 and they've lost 22 against the Knicks.
Okay, so
They actually played a ton in the 90s. They played 6 different matchups in the 90s, including 2 Eastern Conference Finals.
Wow!
And obviously, whoever won just went on to get slaughtered by MJ.
That's right.
Or Hakeem.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, that's not true, because the MJ's in the East, but. When they played, Hakeem would beat them in 94 and 95.
Yeah, absolutely. But those were great series in a very different era of basketball. WNBA underway. Last night you had the new expansion team, the Valkyries, in San Francisco, having their first game. You had Paige Becker's debut, kind of a quiet 10 points. She did start for her Dallas team. They lost as well to a very strong, focused Minnesota Lynx team who lost in Game 7 last year. In the championship, they're one of the favorites. I think they're picked second behind the New York Liberty, who are looking I think the top four right now in terms of the pundits picking if you had to pick an order right now, it would be New York, Minnesota, Las Vegas, then the Indiana Fever. And as I was talking before, Indiana tees off a WNBA taking their cue from the NBA, setting up a great rivalry matchup out of the gate today, where Caitlin Clark and her new high-powered, high-octane all-star lineup Indiana Fever square off against a Chicago Sky team that has made some key additions as well. I'm really curious, Ryan, to see how the WNBA responds this year, because as we've talked about, and we had Sirat Sohi on last week, and we've had others commenting on the WNBA, and I think, again, if you go look for common consensus, it didn't appear that the WNBA was ready for all of the attention that it received last year, with Caitlin Clark coming in with such a disproportionate amount of attention and adulation, and the way that people responded, organizations, management at the league level. Everybody was just, I think it's fair to say, a bit discombobulated about what was going on with all of this success and attention, which the WNBA had been looking for decades, and then all of a sudden it was like, plop, here it is. And I don't think they were ready. So they should be better prepared this year. So how do you think they're going to respond, both on the court and off the court?
I think disproportionate is a good way to put it for last year, because Caitlin Clark, when she was in town, they would move to an NBA-sized arena sometimes, and it'd be the hottest ticket in town over any other sport. Even now, when you look back when she went to Iowa for that preseason game, it was ridiculous. The fanfare and all the girls and boys that were trying to get their stuff signed, that was the role model, right?
Yes.
And you compare that to the rest of the WNBA, not the rest of the WNBA, but to the rest of the WNBA, it's not even close popularity-wise. WNBA is still, it's a popular sport, it's definitely on the rise, and it's still good basketball. But the viewership of the rest of the WNBA compared to Caitlin Clark is not even funny.
It's the attendance and viewership numbers are so skewed.
Like Caitlin Clark will outdraw NBA games.
Yeah.
And the rest of the NBA won't even come close to that.
Absolutely.
That's disproportionate. It's a great way to put it.
Well, and I think, but the trend is you have this disproportionate superstar. And again, I think we've made that reference on this show several times. It's the Tiger Woods. It's the Michael Jordan. It's the Bird and Magic effect. You get these transcendent superstars once in a while that, for whatever compilation of reasons, draw this disproportionate, using the word again, attention to their particular
Whoever had the
sport.
over for disproportionate usage today is a lucky man right now.
That's right.
It's already 4 or 5 times on the.
Well, but it's the right word, yeah. and so this year, but the trend also though is that the overall viewership, without Caitlin Clark even there, is higher than it's been. Now this is going to open the door for what women's basketball wants, which is higher salaries. They're not there yet. They still lost $40 to $50 million as a league last year, even with all of this happening in their behalf. But this year, it's getting stronger, and the groundswell is growing. And I think the appreciation of the women's game is growing as well. And it's a very different game to watch than the men's, but in its own right. Once you spend some time with it and you acquire an understanding of it, it's a really fun game to watch.
Well, if it was the exact same if it was the exact same play as the men's, you wouldn't want to watch it. So I'm glad it's a different thing. It's a different 100%. Product to watch. The WNBA lost money last year. The NBA still does subsidize it,
yes.
But it does help for it to grow. Right? And Paige Becker's coming into the league. Juju Watkins, a couple years down the road, coming into the league, is going to help grow it with the next generation, with these younger girls especially, and younger boys too. Watching these players are mainstream in college. Like in March Madness and women, I think the comparison there is a lot better than the WNBA. The March Madness for women is so similar, and if not more attention to it sometimes than the men's March Madness. And I feel like them watching that and watching the stars in that go to the WNBA and grow up with them essentially, the next generation is going to help push forward.
Absolutely. I mean, you had a supernova in Caitlin Clark, but now this year with Paige Becker's being as
and
popular.
Juju before the injury too.
And Juju before the injury, and now the baton being handed to Juju. It looks like she's going to play her entire career, most likely at USC. We'll see. But with NIL money being at the level
3 years,
that
is 3 years the minimum for WNBA draft, or do you have to play?
I think it's 3 years.
It's 3 years. Okay. Do you think Juju will play 4?
I think she'll play 4 because the money will be better.
Fair enough.
But
you also want to get your clock ticking on the WNBA contract, no?
Well,
because eventually you'll get it, and you get one less year if you go a year earlier before you get your next deal.
Yeah, but if you're making several $1 million staying in college, as opposed to $150,000,
would you argue you still get that, not NIL, but you still get the sponsorships? Like, think about right now, Caitlin Clark. What was her rookie contract, like $70K? Think about the sponsorships, multi-millionaire.
Oh, absolutely.
So you get the clock ticking on the WNBA contract plus the sponsorships you get anyway. No?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. But I think as of right now, the clock ticking in the WNBA is superseded by the NIL. So I think the financial management part of it is a big deal. So anyway, on TV today, there's 2 outstanding matchups as the WNBA season kicks off. What a great time to have that segue from the NBA playoffs, which are going to be heading into the conference finals. Tomorrow, we get to see OKC squaring off against Denver. It's going to be just something so fantastic, I think, to watch. I'm really curious, Ryan, to see how this game shapes up. Because, you've seen kind of some ebbs and flows here where the OKC Thunder, of course, with their firepower, which, by the way, has been sputtering. Lou Dort's an interesting guy. He is a phenomenal, I think, as good a one-on-one NBA defender as I've ever seen. But his shot is so interesting because the arc on it, it's literally coming down with ice on it. Like, the arc is incredible. And he's not the guy that you're surprised when he misses. I'm more still surprised when he makes it because I don't believe in his shot, and he proves me wrong all the time. The guy's phenomenal.
He's been a great shooter this year, yeah.
Yeah, he has.
Honestly, it's not even, I like the arc on it. It's an unorthodox, but the arc on it, I think it makes it look more pretty. Like,
it is beautiful.
Perfect drop. Yeah, he shoots it so high, it feels like he has to adjust for pressure difference when he's shooting it high.
No, but it's good. And where I'm going with the comment, Williams as well on the Thunder is not. He's been struggling big time.
Yeah,
like really.
It's like 5 for 20, May 20th, and.
Now, and this is scary for Denver because this is a really good basketball player with a tremendous engine and sense of pride. Now, he's going to get focused, and he's going to come out, I think, spewing fire when they match up tomorrow. So can Denver withstand the energy that the Thunder are going to come out with? Because they're going to come out and try to blow this wide open. If Denver can keep within a reasonable score, if they can stay within striking distance, and you get into the second half, this is where Jokic and Murray are at their very, very best.
MPJ's hitting shots too. Then.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and if
Aaron Gordon's alive, it's good news too.
Absolutely, if Aaron Gordon can play at a reasonably high level. I just love the matchup, and I think to me, it's a real toss-up.
One of the better series we've seen in a little bit here, eh?
100%. It's a great series, among other really good series, but this is a great series. This is a historically great series to me. Like
the Nuggets just make those all the time, I guess, because the Clippers was great, too.
It was.
That went to 7.
It was, and anytime you get a chance to watch Jokic and Jamal Murray, when Jamal Murray's really on, it's a fun game to watch. So tomorrow is going to be very, very exciting. 3x3, real quick update. The Canadian women are in the semifinals in a women's series game against Poland coming up this afternoon. They're playing off, and if they win that, they'll probably be playing the host team, the Netherlands. The men's national team with Edmontonian Steve Sir will be playing in Kazakhstan for a World Cup qualifier next weekend. So Edmonton well represented again on both the men's and women's side. As we get close to the end of the show, the song in the background is called David's Song by my son Ben with his band Worst Days Down, and it was a tribute to our family's good friend David Finkelman, who was tragically killed in a traffic accident. And of course, we lost our son Ben 2 years ago, and both Ben and David were impactful in so many people's lives. David's theme was always take energetic action in your life. And Ben's theme always was be kind to others, because you just don't know what people are going through unless you walk a mile in their shoes. Please be kind to others think the best of others as you meet them in your day-to-day lives. Want to thank everybody for being with us today. Ryan, fantastic job. Thank you. And look forward to the Edmonton Oilers coming up this coming week.
Oilers next coming week. We got Game 7 tomorrow, as we just mentioned. It's a heck of a week for sports.
WNBA, 3x3, all things going on basketball. Most importantly, we want to thank you for taking your time to be with us today. Basketball show every week. We try to bring you the best we can. We'll try to do it better next time. So have a great week on and off the court. You've been listening to the Basketball Show on your sports leader, Sports 1440. On behalf of Ryan Reen, I'm Paul Sir. Have a great week on and off the court.